Why was everybody wrong about New World? Well, spoiler alert, I don't think they were, but I do think there is an issue with how people treat new MMOs, and we need to sort of address that as a community, I think. But overall, a lot of people said a lot of stuff when New World came out, and a lot of it was true, and a lot of the predictions have come to fruition. Before we jump into this, I just want to thank my YouTube members. Thank you very much to you guys. If you want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. But let's jump in. And we'll start by just taking a few snippets from some content creators about when New World launched.
And there are some mechanics that exist on a much deeper level that are so fundamentally broken, it's going to drive players away or prevent new players from joining.
New World's high watermark endgame drop progression system needs a lot of work.
All right, let's start off really, let's talk about the end game progression loops. Now, end game progression loops in New World are the worst in any real game that I've ever played before.
The questing system gets very repetitive very quickly.
This game in the medium term is going to absolutely nosedive because the game's just not anywhere near being ready. It's like another 2 years of development away from being a competent product.
Some people did say nice things about certain areas of the game, but obviously here I've just cherry picked the negative. And I did that. I effectively went back for this video to what people had said in late 2021, and there were a lot of points that kept coming up. And I can't sit here and tell you right now that those issues at the time were not issues then, because they were. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. And we'll address what some of those issues were in a moment. But for me, the real disconnect was what the general public thought about it. And when I say general public, I mean the general MMO audience and just the general feeling towards New World at the time. It sort of felt, and I don't know why I feel like this, that people were wishing it not to do well. Like once we had the hype launch, it felt like people were almost wishing the game ill. Now, there might be some reasons for that. Maybe people don't like Amazon, I don't know. But people were calling it dead probably a little bit overly quickly. And you know what's weird? I still get people in the comments to this day saying, dead game, the game is dead. To which I say, get a life. Enjoy the games that you enjoy and don't worry about the games or other things that people are enjoying. Just do you. But there was a general feeling and a general sentiment. New World lost 90% of its players in the first couple of months and the game was dead. And I think it's safe to say that that was probably a little bit premature. Sure, the game actually did lose 90% of its players, but I think that was sort of to be somewhat expected. I think it's normal for MMOs, as long as your game isn't like 50% bots or something like that. Just a little dig there at Lost Ark. I think people were just looking at it. It started off with like 1 million players and the game dropped to less than 100,000 relatively quickly. And if you called it dead just because of that, I do think you were wrong. But that's not to say that the game didn't have issues. Of course it did, and it still does to some extent. But I think calling the game prematurely dead didn't really do anybody any favors. Like, if you really thought that, then just don't play it. I think creating the sentiment that it was a dead game, like several months after launch, probably hurt the game in a way that it didn't really need to be hurt, and I'm not necessarily sure it deserved. Now, I don't think that came from content creators, by the way. I think that came from the general MMO community, because the actual issues that a lot of content creators had, well, those were definitely issues at the time. And I'm pleased to report that, thankfully, a lot of them have been addressed in some way. Not all of them, but a lot of them. One of the main feedbacks was basically that the high watermark gear score was, well, terrible, and the end game was limited. And I would be like surprised to find anybody who was like, no, I really like that at launch. But maybe there's some weirdos out there. I'm not going to judge. But those systems right now and the end game is much better. I'm not going to explain why, but it's gone into a new system called Expertise. It's easier to control. There's a lot more endgame content. Yes, there's no raids or anything like that yet, but there's a lot of endgame expeditions that you can do. You can do them for free instead of paying. It's good stuff, right? I could probably sit here and go through Lazy Peon's old con list and say, oh, that's been ticked off, that's fine, and that's not fine, that's still a problem. I think most of them will have actually been resolved, but he wasn't wrong for stating that they were issues at the time. Of course, that was correct and that was right. Now, not everything has been resolved. For example, gear management is something that we know is being worked on, but it's not in the game right now. So if you found managing your gear sets to be a pain, that exists right now. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that New World is perfect. It isn't. So I don't think the content creators got it wrong. And a lot of them actually said that the game would be much better in 1 to 2 years' time. And I think we are well on that path right now. I do think that the issue was that the general sentiment of the MMO community was wrong, or at least not a very welcoming place for the game. I don't know if it's because people are tribal about the MMO that they play or what have you, but as I said earlier, it felt like people didn't want New World to succeed in a way. But then there was other people, like Asmongold being one of them, who genuinely wanted a new good MMO. But it did feel a little bit tribalistic to me, and I'd like to see that go from the community. I don't think we should see a game that loses 90% of its population from launch and be like, that game is instantly dead. I don't think we can expect games to launch with the kind of content that World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy have had, because those games have been around for years and years. It would be unrealistic for most MMOs to launch in that state. Now, I actually do appreciate that it is sort of worth knowing if a game is going to die or not die, and you don't necessarily know which games are going to rebound versus which ones aren't. You don't want to play a game that actually will die because it will feel like wasted time. Now, the good thing is that Amazon basically showed commitment to the game. They had great communication, and we had a roadmap, and we knew they were going to support it for a medium to long term. And well, because it's Amazon, you sort of knew that would happen. They obviously did not want a failure on their hands, and to the extent Jeff Bezos actually tweeted about New World himself, and at that point to shut it down would have been a monumental embarrassment. So I don't think that was ever really on the card, and a game is truly only dead when you can't play it anymore. I do know somebody who was definitely wrong though, me. I made a video last year, like towards the end of it, probably in December, where I stated that New World would be the best MMO of 2022. Now, not in terms of content, but I said in terms of like the feel-good factor of an MMO, I felt New World would be that game of 2022. A little bit like how Final Fantasy was probably the MMO of 2021. And while New World is currently experiencing a significant rebound and a regrowth in population, if I'm honest, I sort of expected that to happen a little bit sooner than it is doing. However, I am obviously pleased to see that rebound happening right now. I don't think though at the end of this year people will look back and be like, New World had a great year. New World's having a good end of year, but I still think people would probably put World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy above it. Maybe next year will be New World's year. I'll probably talk about that in December. So if you see people wondering why everybody was wrong about New World, maybe you're sat there and you were thinking maybe you were wrong about New World. You probably weren't. I don't think content creators were, and I don't think a lot of the community was. People probably genuinely stopped because they weren't enjoying the game, which is a perfectly good reason to stop playing a game, by the way. The game had a lot of issues, and that's undeniable, but it's really good to see that a lot of these issues are getting resolved and have already been resolved. The only thing I think we really need to solve is the MMO community's expectations, and maybe we need to stop calling everything dead a little bit prematurely, which I'm sure I'm guilty of, by the way. I'm trying to get the YouTube clicks, don't blame me. Blame yourselves. No, but I actually do probably have to shoulder some of the blame there myself a little bit as well. But when an MMO launches, maybe we shouldn't be asking if it's dead until maybe at least, 6 months after, maybe even 12 months after it's launched. Let's see what they do in their first year and then try and make a judgment. And I'll try and do that as well. And I personally have a concern with a game like Ashes of Creation. The hype for that game is unreal, and I think it's going to be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for Ashes of Creation to live up to that hype, which then means I worry we'll end up in the same boat. It'll have a massive launch, and then a steep fall off, if we even actually know the play numbers, but that's not really for this video. And then will we be in the same boat? Will we have a billion content creators, including myself, being like, is the game dead? Maybe, but maybe let's try and not do it. Let's try and give it a year after it launches, and then we can have a proper discussion about it. Now, I personally have a Ashes of Creation YouTube channel. If you do want to check that out, there'll be a link in the description or in the comments, wherever I put it. But yeah, overall, the game had issues, New World had issues, it lacked content, etc. A lot of these issues have now been resolved. And you know what? People are coming back to the game. If you gave up on it because of those reasons and you just wrote it off as dead, then do consider giving it a second chance. If not now, then in a couple of months or something. And as a community as a whole, let's try and stop calling everything dead. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to subscribe to that because I want that YouTube dough, I guess. Not that I make that much money, but you know, let's try and be a bit more reasonable perhaps. And I shoulder some of that blame. Again, big shout out to my YouTube members. I do truly appreciate you guys. If you want to support the channel, that is truly the best way to support the channel. But let me know your thoughts about this game. Were you wrong when the game launched? Did you stop for a legitimate reason and that reason's been fixed? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be very intrigued. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.